The Galactic declared war, and Earth smiled like it was finally time. Part 1. The message came from deep space, riding on a beam of clean, cold light that sliced through the silence between stars. It arrived at every major communications hub on Earth at the exact same moment, as if the senders wanted no one to miss it. Screens lit up in government offices, news stations, military bases, and even on public billboards in cities like New York, Lagos, and Sydney. A voice, smooth and toneless, spoke in every major human language, one after another, without pause. "You have been observed," it said. "Your species is young, loud, and divided. You waste your world, fight over dust, and dream of stars you do not deserve. The Galactic Concordance has ruled for 10,000 cycles. We bring order. You will now obey." Then came the demand. Earth was to shut down all weapons, nuclear, orbital, cyber, even handheld firearms, within 30 standard cycles, which humans quickly calculated as 28 Earth days. All military bases were to stand down. All warships, real or planned, were to be dismantled. A Concordance oversight fleet would arrive at the edge of the solar system to confirm compliance. If Earth refused or delayed or even hesitated, the planet would be pacified. That word hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Everyone knew what it meant. Most species in the galaxy, upon hearing such a message, would have panicked. They would have begged, pleaded, or hidden. But Earth did none of those things. In Washington, D.C., President Daniel Hayes sat alone in the Situation Room after the broadcast ended. The lights were dim. Maps of the solar system glowed on the walls. His advisors stood frozen, waiting for orders, for fear, for anything. But Hayes just leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and smiled. It wasn't a wide grin or a laugh. It was quiet, almost peaceful, like a man who had waited years for a train to finally arrive. "About time," he murmured. Across the ocean, in a small apartment in Berlin, a retired Marine named Carl Jenkins watched the message on his old tablet. He didn't curse. He didn't call his daughter in fear. He just turned off the screen, walked to his balcony, and looked up at the night sky. Stars glittered like distant campfires. He lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in 10 years, and exhaled slowly. "Took you long enough," he said to the dark. In Houston, inside a secure hangar buried beneath layers of concrete and steel, aerospace engineer Kyle Briggs stood beside a half-finished starship. It had no name yet, only a project code, Dawnbreaker. Its hull was matte black, its engines wrapped in thermal cloaking. Around him, dozens of engineers worked in silence, eyes sharp, hands steady. When the Concordance message played over the hangar's speakers, no one stopped. No one even looked up. One young technician, a woman named Maya Ruiz, paused only to adjust her headset and say, "Good. Now we don't have to pretend anymore." That was the strangest thing about Earth's reaction. There was no mass hysteria, no riots, no governments collapsing in fear. Instead, something quiet and deep moved through the planet, like a current under still water. People went to work. Trains ran on time. Children went to school. But in back rooms, in hidden labs, in underground bunkers and orbital stations, things began to change. Satellites that had been labeled weather monitoring shifted their orbits. Factories that made solar panels quietly switched production lines to armor plating. In the deserts of Nevada and the mountains of Tibet, massive doors slid open in the earth, revealing launch silos that hadn't been used in decades, not because they were obsolete, but because they'd been waiting. The Concordance had made one terrible mistake. They assumed humanity was like every other young species they'd encountered, eager to please, desperate for approval, terrified of the dark. They didn't understand that humans had spent their entire history fighting, against nature, against each other, against the limits of their own bodies and minds. War wasn't new to them. It was familiar. And more than that, it was something they had learned to master in silence. While the galaxy watched Earth through long-range sensors, expecting panic, they saw only calm. Cities lit up at night as usual. Planes flew. Ships sailed. Farmers planted crops. But beneath that calm surface, the planet was arming itself, not with rage, but with purpose. President Hayes finally stood up and walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over the Potomac River. He picked up a secure phone and dialed a single number. When it connected, he said only 2 words. "Initiate protocol." Far away, in a command center beneath the ice of Antarctica, A red light blinked on. A voice echoed through steel corridors. "All units, stand by. Dawnbreaker is go." Back in Berlin, Carl Jenkins stubbed out his cigarette and went inside. He opened a closet that looked ordinary but had a biometric lock. Inside hung a uniform he hadn't worn since the last global crisis, 20 years ago. He ran a hand over the fabric, then took it down. In Tokyo, a schoolteacher named Lisa Morgan turned off the news and gathered her students. "Today," she said, "we're going to talk about courage. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that waits." And in orbit, aboard a space station disguised as a debris cleanup platform, pilot Nate Brooks checked his flight suit and smiled as he strapped in. "Let them come," he whispered. The Concordants thought they were delivering an ultimatum, but Earth heard it as an invitation. And for the first time in a long time, the whole planet smiled, not in fear, not in anger, but in quiet, certain readiness. It was finally time. The Galactic declared war, and Earth smiled like it was finally time. Part 2. After the message from the Concordants, the world did not fall apart. Instead, it began to tighten. Like a spring coiled in silence, Earth held its breath and prepared. To outside eyes, nothing seemed to change. Markets opened. Trains ran. Children played in parks. But beneath the surface, a machine older than most governments hummed to life. It had no name, no flag, no public face. It was simply known as the Pact, an unspoken agreement between every nation that had ever fought, bled, or dreamed of the stars. Decades ago, after the first alien probe skimmed past Pluto and sent back data labeling humanity as unstable but potentially useful, Earth's leaders made a choice. They would not beg for a seat at the galactic table. They would not parade their weaknesses or advertise their fears. Instead, they would hide their strength and wait. The pact was born in secret rooms over encrypted lines, in handshakes between old enemies who understood one truth: the universe was not kind to the unready. Now, with the Concordance's deadline ticking, that patience ended. In a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, scientists reviewed decades of hidden research. Leo Grant, a quiet man with tired eyes and ink-stained fingers, stood before a wall of screens showing energy signatures from alien ships. He had spent 15 years studying how their gravity drives worked, not by asking nicely, but by analyzing every stray signal that drifted near Earth's sensors. Now, he tapped a key and a new waveform pulsed across the display, a frequency that could scramble artificial gravity fields. "It's ready," he said. No one cheered. They just nodded and moved to the next task. On the far side of the moon, inside a crater named Tycho, massive robotic arms assembled warships in total darkness. These vessels bore no national markings. Their hulls were smooth, black, and shaped like blades. They carried no loud engines or bright lights. Instead, they used silent ion thrusters and heat-diffusing skins that made them nearly invisible to long-range scans. Workers in pressurized suits moved with calm efficiency. They had trained for this moment since they were teenagers. Some had never even seen Earth's surface. Back on the planet, Maya Ruiz climbed into a flight simulator hidden under a wheat field in Kansas. The pod dropped into the ground, sealed shut and activated. Around her, stars bloomed in perfect detail. Enemy fleet formations, based on stolen Concordance patrol logs, swarmed the void. She didn't flinch. Her hands moved with steady rhythm, dodging phantom fire, lining up impossible shots. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her breathing stayed even. After the simulation ended, her instructor, a former pilot named Nate Brooks, gave a single thumbs up through the glass. "You're ready," he said. She nodded. She had known that for weeks. Meanwhile, in the Pacific Ocean, near a chain of islands no one visited, marine biologist Chloe Evans monitored deep-sea sensors. To the world, she studied coral reefs. In truth, she watched tectonic plates. Beneath the ocean floor, humanity had planted resonance emitters, devices that could, if triggered, send focused seismic pulses through the planet's crust. Not to destroy Earth, but to shake apart any ship foolish enough to land without permission. The system was called Terra's Fist, and it had never been tested. But Chloe checked it every day, like someone checking the locks on their door before bed. The Concordance scouts watched from the edge of the solar system. Their long-range probes saw only what Earth wanted them to see: old satellites, peaceful cargo haulers, cities glowing with harmless light. They did not see the drone factories humming inside hollowed-out asteroids. They did not see the neural link training camps in Siberia, where soldiers learned to control weapons with thought alone. They did not see the children in classrooms learning alien languages, not to speak but to intercept and decode. Earth had played its part well. For years it had acted like a confused child, arguing over borders, wasting resources, broadcasting reality shows and pop songs into the void. The galaxy assumed humanity was too busy fighting itself to ever unite. That was the greatest trick of all. Because while the world seemed divided on the surface, beneath it, every nation shared one secret. They were already one army. In Cairo, a young coder named Amir Hassan rewrote firewall protocols that would soon blind Concordance hacking attempts. In Buenos Aires, engineers tested railguns disguised as wind turbines. In Oslo, doctors perfected battlefield nanites that could seal wounds in seconds. None of them spoke of their work. They didn't need to. Everyone understood the stakes. As the days passed, the Concordance grew confident. No distress signals, no frantic broadcasts, no pleas for mercy, just silence. They took it as surrender. Their fleet began its slow approach, engines glowing like distant suns. 10,000 ships, each larger than cities, carrying weapons that had erased entire civilizations. They expected Earth to kneel when they arrived, but Earth was not kneeling. In Houston, Kyle Briggs stood beside the completed Dawnbreaker. Its engines hummed at low power, waiting. He ran a hand along its hull and thought of his father, who had worked on the first Mars lander. "We've been waiting for you," he whispered. In Washington, President Hayes reviewed final deployment orders. No grand speeches, no last-minute doubts, just clear, clean commands sent through secure channels. All units hold position. Let them come closer. And in Berlin, Carl Jenkins finished polishing his old uniform. He pinned a single badge to his chest, a silver circle with a line through it, the symbol of the pact. He looked in the mirror and smiled. Not with joy, but with peace. He had trained for this his whole life. Now it was real. The Concordance believed they were bringing order to a chaotic world. They did not know that chaos had been a mask, that every argument, every protest, every messy election had been part of the disguise. While the galaxy slept, Earth had built a shield from silence and a sword from patience, and now, with the enemy almost at the door, humanity did not tremble. It waited, it watched, and deep in its bones, it smiled. The Galactic declared war, and Earth smiled like it was finally time. Part 3. The Concordance fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system right on schedule. 10,000 ships, each shaped like a silver claw, drifted past the orbit of Neptune. Their commanders expected silence, fear, maybe a final plea. Instead, they found nothing. No signals, no ships. No signs of life beyond the usual radio noise from Earth's surface. Music, news, children laughing in playgrounds. It was as if humanity had vanished. The lead admiral, a tall, gray-skinned being named Vexer, frowned at his display. "Scan again," he ordered. They must be hiding, but they weren't hiding. They were waiting. Deep in the asteroid belt, Maya Ruiz sat in the cockpit of her fighter, the Black Finch. Her breath was slow. Her hands rested lightly on the controls. Around her, 200 other pilots waited in perfect silence, engines off, power drawn down to near zero. Their ships clung to the shadows of rocks, invisible to all but the sharpest eyes. They had trained for this moment for years, not to win a war with brute force, but to win it before it truly began. When the Concordance fleet crossed the orbit of Jupiter, the first strike happened. It wasn't fire or explosions. It was silence. One by one, Concordance ships flickered. Lights dimmed. Engines sputtered. Alarms blared in alien tongues. On the bridge of Vexer's flagship, screens went dark. Navigation failed. Artificial gravity stuttered, sending crew members floating mid-air. Confusion spread like a virus. What they didn't know was that Earth's drone swarms had already been in place for weeks. Tiny, insect-like machines, no bigger than a coin, had latched onto hulls during routine sensor sweeps. Now triggered by a single coded pulse from Earth, they unleashed electromagnetic bursts tuned to the exact frequency of Concordance power cores. The ships weren't destroyed, they were paralyzed. Maya didn't wait. "Go," she said into her comm. 200 fighters peeled from the rocks and shot forward, silent and fast. They didn't fire missiles. They fired data spikes, nanosecond bursts of code that hijacked enemy comms, scrambled targeting systems, and played false sensor readings into their bridges. To the Concordance, it looked like their own fleet was turning on itself. Ships fired on shadows. Friendlies locked weapons on each other. Chaos bloomed in the cold dark. From lunar orbit, Nate Brooks watched the battle unfold on his screen. He sat in the command chair of the Dawnbreaker, Earth's first true warship. Its hull was dark as space, its weapons hidden behind smooth panels. Around him, a crew of 50 moved with calm focus. No shouting, no panic. Just quiet orders and steady hands. "Send the second wave," Nate said. From the far side of Mars, a dozen larger vessels emerged. They looked like cargo haulers, old, slow, harmless. But as they neared the Concordance fleet, their outer shells split open, revealing railgun arrays and plasma lances. They fired not at ships but at the fleet's support drones, the small craft that carried fuel, repairs, and communications. One by one, those drones vanished in silent flashes. The Concordance had never fought a war like this. They expected a wall of fire, a desperate last stand. Instead, they faced ghosts. Every move they made was anticipated. Every weakness exploited. Their own technology, which they believed superior, turned against them. On Earth, people watched from public screens in town squares and living rooms. There were no cheers, no wild celebrations, just quiet nods. A father held his daughter's hand and whispered, "We're okay." A group of students in Mumbai paused their lesson to glance at the sky, then returned to their work. The war was happening far away, but everyone felt it. The shift in the air, the weight lifting from their shoulders. Back in the battle zone, Vexer finally understood. "They knew," he hissed. "They knew everything." His ship shuddered as a railgun round punched through its outer shield, not to destroy but to disable. The lights died. Life support slowed. On his view screen, he saw human ships gliding past, not firing, not gloating. Just watching. Waiting. Then a voice came through his comms. It was calm. Human. Female. "This is Captain Maya Ruiz of Earth Defense. You are surrounded. Power down your weapons. No one has to die today," Vexer wanted to rage, to order a final suicidal charge. But he looked at his crew, scared, confused, floating in the dark, and knew it was over. Slowly, he gave the order to stand down. On the Dawnbreaker, Nate allowed himself a small smile. "Good," he said. "Now they learn. The real victory wasn't in the ships they disabled. It was in the message it sent across the galaxy. The Concordance wasn't invincible. Humanity wasn't weak. And Earth didn't fight to conquer. It fought to survive, and to show others that survival was possible. As the disabled Concordance fleet drifted, human tugs moved in to secure them. No prisoners were taken, no ships were looted. Instead, medics boarded to check on alien crews. Engineers offered to help repair non-weapon systems. It was mercy, but not weakness. It was strength with purpose. In Washington, President Hayes received the report. He didn't call a press conference. He simply walked to the window, looked up at the stars, and said, "Phase 1 complete." Down in Houston, Kyle Briggs watched the live feed from the Dawnbreaker's cameras. He saw human and alien ships floating side by side in the void, not as enemies, but as something new. He thought of all the years of secret work, the sleepless nights, the doubts. It had all led here, and for the first time, the galaxy saw Earth not as a problem to be solved, but as a force to be reckoned with. The Concordance had come to teach humanity a lesson. Instead, humanity taught them one. War wasn't about size or numbers. It was about who was ready, and Earth had been ready longer than anyone knew. The Galactic declared war, and Earth smiled like. It was finally time. Part 4 news of the Concordance's defeat spread faster than any ship could fly. It rippled through trade lanes, whispered in spaceports, and flashed across data nets from the Orion Arm to the galactic core. Species that had lived under the Concordance's rule for centuries watched the footage in stunned silence. They saw 10,000 warships, once symbols of unstoppable order, drifting helplessly near Jupiter, their crews unharmed but humbled, their weapons dark. And they saw small, quiet human vessels moving among them like shepherds guiding lost sheep. No one had ever done that before. On Earth, people did not celebrate with fireworks or parades. There was no victory speech from the president. Instead, life went on as it always had, only now with a new kind of calm in the air. In Tokyo, Lisa Morgan taught her students about ancient Rome, drawing parallels between fallen empires and the Concordance's sudden weakness. In Berlin, Carl Jenkins stood guard at a newly opened liaison center where alien diplomats, nervous and wide-eyed, stepped onto human soil for the first time. He didn't salute them. He just nodded and said, "Welcome." The Concordance High Council, shaken and divided, sent a message. Not a threat this time, but a request. They asked for talks, for terms, for a way to end this without more blood. President Daniel Hayes listened to their words in the quiet of his office. Then he turned to his advisors and said, "We don't negotiate from fear. We don't beg. But we also don't gloat. Tell them we'll meet, but not here. Not on their ship. On neutral ground." The meeting place was chosen. A small research station orbiting Saturn built years ago by Earth and never used. It had no weapons, no defenses, just clean rooms and clear windows. When the Concordance delegates arrived, they expected armed guards, scanners, humiliation. Instead, they were greeted by Maya Ruiz in a simple uniform, no sidearm, no escort. She offered them water, real Earth water, and showed them to the conference room. Inside, Hayes waited alone. No generals, no lawyers, just one man sitting at a plain table. He stood when they entered. "Thank you for coming," he said. The lead delegate, a tall being with silver eyes, stared at him. "You could have destroyed us." Hayes shook his head. "We don't destroy. We protect. There's a difference." He laid out Earth's terms. No surrender, no occupation, no oversight. Instead, he proposed a new agreement: mutual respect, free passage, shared knowledge, and one rule above all: no species would ever be forced to kneel again. The Concordance delegates exchanged glances. This wasn't what they expected. They had prepared for demands, for revenge, for Earth to take its turn as the galaxy's new master. But humanity wanted none of that. Back on Earth, the work continued. In the Pacific, Chloe Evans monitored the tectonic grid, now set to standby. In Houston, Kyle Briggs helped design a new class of ship, one meant for rescue, not war. Its hull would carry medical bays, translation labs, and open comms for any species in need. "Call it the Horizon," he told his team, "because that's what we're offering." Meanwhile, whispers grew louder across the galaxy. On worlds long silent under Concordance rule, people began to speak. A mining colony near Vega declared independence. A trade guild on Proxima Centauri refused to pay tribute. A fleet of former Concordance allies broke formation and vanished into uncharted space. The old order was cracking, not from a hammer blow, but from the quiet weight of an idea. If Earth could stand, so could they. On Mars, Nate Brooks oversaw the transfer of Concordance prisoners, though they weren't called prisoners. They were guests. Each was given food, shelter, and the choice to return home or stay and learn. Some chose to stay. One young engineer from a waterworld species asked to see how human gravity simulators worked. Nate showed him. They spoke for hours, not as enemies, but as curious minds. In Washington, Hayes received reports from every corner of human space. All clear, all calm. No attacks, no panic, just steady progress. He walked to the memorial wall in the White House garden, a simple stone engraved with names of those who had died in past wars, both human and alien. He placed a hand on it and whispered, "We remember. That's why we fight smart." The galaxy watched Earth closely now, not with fear, but with something new: respect. Ships from neutral systems began appearing at the edge of the solar system, not to spy, but to ask questions. How did you do it? How did you stay hidden? How did you win without hate? Earth's answer was always the same. We prepared, we waited, and we never forgot who we are. One evening, as the sun set over the Atlantic, a child in Lisbon asked her mother, "Are the aliens coming back?" Her mother looked at the sky, where a single human patrol ship glided silently overhead. "Maybe," she said. "But if they do, they'll find us ready. And maybe, just maybe, they'll find us kind." Deep in the Antarctic Command Center, the red light still glowed, but softer now. Not a warning. A promise. The Concordance had thought war would break Earth. Instead, it revealed Earth's true shape. Not a planet of fighters, but of builders. Not conquerors, but guardians. And as the stars watched, Earth smiled, not in triumph, but in quiet hope, because the hardest part was over. Now came the real work. Building a galaxy where no one had to be afraid again. The Galactic declared war, and Earth smiled like it was finally time part. The war ended not with a treaty signed in gold ink, but with a handshake in a quiet room orbiting Saturn. The Concordance did not collapse. It changed. Its leaders, once proud and certain, now spoke in softer tones. They had learned that strength was not just in weapons, but in restraint. Earth did not take their worlds, their tech, or their pride. It offered something rarer: trust. In the months that followed, human and former Concordance engineers worked side by side on joint stations near Mars and Titan. They shared designs for clean energy, for faster-than-light comms, for healing wounds that once meant death. Kyle Briggs stood beside an alien technician from a desert world, both of them laughing over a stubborn power coupling that refused to lock. Neither spoke the other's language well, but hands and smiles were enough. On Earth, life returned to its usual rhythm, but with a new layer of quiet confidence. Children grew up hearing stories not just of heroes who fought, but of those who chose peace when they could have taken revenge. In classrooms, teachers like Lisa Morgan spoke of the pact not as a secret weapon, but as a lesson: that unity does not mean sameness, and strength does not mean cruelty. Maya Ruiz no longer flew combat missions. Instead, she trained cadets from a dozen species in the skies above Nevada. Her students came from worlds that had once been enemies. Some had lost family in the brief war. Others had never seen Earth before. She taught them how to read the stars, how to trust their instincts, and most of all, how to choose when not to fire. A true pilot, she told them, knows the difference between a threat and a stranger. Deep in the Pacific, Chloe Evans shut down the tectonic defense grid for good. The emitters were sealed, their power redirected to deep-sea research. She stood on the deck of a floating lab, watching dolphins leap in the sunset light. For the first time in years, she felt no urgency in her chest. The world was safe, not because it was hidden, but because it was respected. President Daniel Hayes stepped down at the end of his term, as all leaders must. He gave no grand farewell, just a short speech from the White House lawn, with the cherry blossoms blooming behind him. "We didn't win because we were the strongest," he said. "We won because we remembered why we fight: to protect, not to rule. That's the Earth way, and I hope it becomes the galaxy's way too." The crowd did not cheer. They stood in silence, then slowly began to clap, not for him but for the idea he carried. Nate Brooks took command of the Horizon, Earth's first true peacekeeping vessel. It carried no weapons, only labs, medbays, and open comms. Its first mission was to a star system on the Galactic Rim, where a civil war had raged for decades. When the Horizon arrived, both sides expected another empire to pick a favorite. Instead, Nate offered mediators food and clean water. Within weeks, talks began. Within months, peace held news of this spread. More ships like the Horizon were built, not by Earth alone, but by coalitions of species who had once been silent. A new alliance formed, not through force, but through choice. They called it the Accord, and its first rule was simple: no species speaks for another without their voice at the table. Back in Berlin, Carl Jenkins retired his uniform for good. He opened a small cafe near the old liaison center. Aliens of all shapes and sizes came to drink Earth coffee and eat pastries. He didn't charge them. He just wanted them to feel welcome. One day, a young Concordance officer, now a diplomat, sat at his counter and said, "You fought us. Why are you kind now?" Carl poured him a cup and smiled. "Because war ends. But how you treat people after, that's who you really are." In Houston, the Dawnbreaker was decommissioned, not scrapped, but placed in orbit as a museum. School groups from Earth and beyond toured its halls, touching the controls, reading the logs, learning how one ship helped change the galaxy not by destroying, but by showing what was possible. Years passed. The stars grew quieter, but not empty. Trade flourished. Ideas crossed borders faster than ships. And whenever a new threat appeared, a rogue AI fleet from the Dark Rim, a plague that jumped species, a black hole drifting too close to a colony, Earth was never the first to shout. But it was always the first to act. It sent ships. It sent scientists. It sent hope. One morning, long after the war had faded into history books, President Hayes, now an old man with white hair and steady hands, stood on a balcony in Virginia. The sun rose over the hills, painting the sky in soft gold. A child no older than 6 stood beside him, looking up. "Grandpa," she asked, "are we safe now?" He looked at her, then at the sky where human and alien ships moved together like birds in formation. He thought of all the years of silence, of waiting, of building in the dark. He thought of the smile Earth gave the galaxy when war was declared, not out of arrogance but out of readiness. "No one's ever truly safe," he said gently. "But we're ready." "And that's enough." The child nodded, satisfied. She turned and ran inside to tell her friends about the ship she saw. And high above, the horizon glided past the moon, its light steady, its mission clear. Earth had not become a galactic power. It had become something better, a promise. A reminder that even the smallest world, if it stands with courage and kindness, can change the stars. And as the sun climbed higher, warming the soil where seeds were being planted, the whole planet smiled again, not because the danger was gone, but because they knew, deep in their bones, that they would face whatever came next, together.